All right, let's make some posters. I want to show you all the cool stuff you can do with images within InDesign. So let's make a new document. Just to make life easy, I'm going to make this 8.5 by 11. 2 pages because we're going to make 2 of these posters. Our margin should be 0.25. That's just the guide around the edge. And then bleed is 0.125, which is always that. And then let's make our background. So for InDesign, you don't need to have everything on its own layer, but it does help to have a background on its own layer. So I'm going to not only make this its own layer, but put it underneath so that we never get tangled up. For this background color, you can use the rectangle frame tool or the rectangle tool. These are just containers, and we're just going to fill them with color. So I've got to drag this all the way to the bleed line. So you can see that my rectangle right here has to go at least past the page to the bleed line. It can go beyond that. This goes beyond it. It can go as far as you want beyond that, but it has to go at least to there. So it's all now past the page to the bleed. Let's make it into a color. So I'm going to make a new color swatch. And what I want is just a little bit of magenta in this. Nothing else. I'll take out that black so it's nice and bright. And that's our background color. Now we can lock that on a layer so that we don't have to deal with it anymore. And we can go here and we want to start making these boxes. So I can just drag it out here. I want to make it about 8.5, about the width here, or 8.75 is good. For the height, we could go to 1.71, 1.7, something like that. And then what I want to do is I want to make 4 of these total, and I want them to all be the same. So I'm going to go up here to something really easy and handy to use, and that is step and repeat. So I want 4 of these total, which means I have to repeat this shape for the offset. That's just asking me how far do I want it to go. So I'm just going to click along until I see a little sliver of space between each of these boxes. Yeah, that looks good. Now let's take those and offset them just a little bit. So we're going to take the second one and the fourth one, hold down the shift key when you move it so that they stay in line. And we're going to move that about right there. So now we have these offset rectangles, and I'm going to make them into a compound path. So I'll go to Path, Make Compound Path. Now watch what happens. Right now each of these has an X in the rectangle, but once I join them together as one compound path, there's one X for the whole thing. And that's because now instead of 4 individual containers, it's one container with 4 boxes. So you can see if I color these, you can see what I have, kind of almost like a black flag logo. And we're going to take that. Now that container can hold an image, color, type, whatever. But we're going to put a photo in there. So let's place our jazz guy in there, and I'll show you how cool that is. So now the container, this is the container. If I double click, this is our jazz guy, and I can move him around within those shapes. Cool, right? So I get him just the way I want him, and that looks good. So we'll just leave that like that for now, and we'll move it up here. Now we need to put in our type. So I'm going to make a type box right on the margin that says KLON Presents. And I want to use Helvetica Bold Condensed for this. That's a nice typeface to go against this yellow and against these bold shapes. And let's make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to use my shortcut again, Shift Command and the greater than sign. And let's just bump this up to 28. That looks good. Now with type, remember that there is the type within the container and the container. So if I want to center this text within that container, I would do that. But if I wanted to center the box, like let's say this box was shorter like that, and I wanted to center it on the page, in that case I would do align and make sure that it's aligned to the page. So that centers it right like that. So let's leave that there. And then move this over here a little bit. And we're going to want to put the date. So I'm just going to borrow this text box that I made and bring it down here and shorten it. So we're going to use the same type for consistency, and I'm just going to put July 30. And again, we're going to go as large as we can, and we want to take this 30 and make it quite a bit larger. And the idea is that we want to make these two the same width. And I know it's tempting to make a text box for July and one for 30, but once you learn how to adjust leading, so this is, remember that leading, oddly enough, adjust above it. So to get this 30 tighter to July, I just put less leading on it. And I bump it all the way up. And then I can also make it bigger. I'd like to make this the width, same width as July. So that looks good. And we could even take a little bit of spacing out between the two letters. And that happens right here in the kerning. So I'm just going to tighten that a little bit. Now it's the same width. And now I'll bring it down by adjusting the leading. And remember, this is only on the 30 till I get that nice and perfect. So now I like the way these look, but I also want them to be the height of these bars. And this is a little bit big. So you're thinking, uh-oh, now I got to go and adjust all that again. No, you don't. When you have a container and the object in the container, whether it's text or an image, you can do a power scale. Shift Command, hold onto those first, and then grab the corner. And it will size, watch, I'll do it again. It will size the object in the container and the container. So what it's doing is it's keeping that type lined up the way we had it. It's just making it bigger or smaller. So it's a much easier way when you get type looking the way you want to size it without having to start over. So we're just going to bring that down just a little bit. And you can use rulers. I'm going to drag down a guide right here and a guide at the top to make sure that this goes right to it. Perfect. So there's July 30, KLON Presents. Now we need the word jazz, which will probably be similar to this. So I'm going to grab that 30, make a big box, paste it in there, and change it to jazz. And I think we can go bigger with jazz. I'd actually like this to be the height of the rectangle also. We can do the same thing that we did. Instead of guessing, I'm going to make this box much smaller, right to the type, and then I'm going to just keep sizing it until it's the height of that box. So I'm going to hit Shift Command before I grab the corner, Shift Command, then I grab the corner, and it will make the type and the container larger at the same time. So that looks perfect, all nice and lined up. And I also want to line it up to the edge, the left edge. So I'll put a guide there. This whole thing is like a puzzle, and I want it all synced up so it has kind of a logic to it. Under jazz, there's two more bits of type we have to put, or one more really. It's the location and the time. And you could put it in the same box, but it's such a radically different size that I would actually just grab the box from up here. The KLON Presents. I'm going to hold the Option key, and I'm just going to bring that down. And I'm going to go ahead and make this left aligned. And I'm going to put that alignment right on line. And I'm going to highlight this and just retype. And this is going to say Northern Hotel. And I'm going to return. Now there's not room in this container, so it's bumping that second line. 8 p.m. Okay. Now I want to tighten up the leading here. Keep in mind, do you see the parentheses around this leading amount? So this is the type size. This is the leading. The parentheses around that means that it's the automatic default leading for that type size. And you can see that if the type goes bigger, the leading goes bigger. It has a formula for how much bigger the leading is, and that's what it's adjusting. As soon as you adjust the leading on your own, the parentheses go away and it will stop adjusting. So now if I make this bigger or smaller, it doesn't matter. The leading stays the same. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then there's a couple ways I can put this at an angle. One is I could just put my cursor at this corner, and I have everything selected. And I could just put my cursor like that and change the angle. The other thing I could do is just click in the number. So if that other number was 11, I could just put 11 here, and it'll do it that way. So now what we have to do is we have to get this to come to the margins. Do you see these red lines? July is going past it. KLON has plenty of room, and this is going down there. So I'm going to grab everything again, and I'm going to try to move it so it sits right on. You can see that it's never going to quite sit on there because of the spacing. Now, one thing I can do is definitely bring this down closer. Now I'll try it again. I'm going to grab everything. I'm going to just bump it up so that S in KLON Presents, and it's still too big. See that? It goes below the margin. So again, we'll do our power scale. I don't want to go in and resize all this stuff. Shift Command and then bring it up. And I want that 8 p.m. to sit right on the margin. There it goes. And then we need, so now KLON presents right on that margin, 8 p.m. on that one, but the July 30th is still outside that margin limit, so we'll just bump it like that. Here's something to think about. First, we'll look at it like this. The problem is this bar right here is almost to the edge, but it's not bleeding off, and that creates kind of a weird tension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that rectangle so it's longer. You're thinking, how do you change it when you made it to a compound path? Easy. You just go to Object, Path, Release Compound Path. So release the compound path. While it's released, I'm going to pull these out. And then I'm going to select them again. Go to Object, Path, Make Compound Path. And then it all comes back in. So now it looks like we got plenty for bleed. So the image has to go to the bleed, and you can see I just made it. The image at any angle, it doesn't matter what it is, it has to go to that red line. And you can see mine go past, which is fine. There's no problem having too much bleed, but you have to have at least a certain amount. Okay, so that's our poster.